Welcome to San Joaquin Spotlight, a public affairs program featuring conversations about life in the central San Joaquin Valley. This program is brought to you in partnership between KFSR 90.7 FM and CMAC Fresno. I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian. Today we're going to be talking about writing with local author Michael Krikorian. I say local because, Michael, you were originally from Fresno, right?
No.
Where are you originally from?
Well, actually, my mom.
Was from Fresno?
No, I was originally from my mom, who happened to be in Castro Valley when I was born.
Okay, and then what was your connection to Fresno?
My car.
And
Got
what
me
else?
back and forth. When I was in college, I had to go back and forth somehow, do the laundry. So that my parents could at least realize they had another kid.
Well, before I continue, I first never really welcomed you on the program.
Don't bother. I don't
welcome
welcome
to the program, Michael
that's okay.
Krikorian. And I'm going to call you a local author because don't you have a home here?
Yeah, but I don't make too much loud. I don't talk about it too loudly. The IRS is in town too, so I got to keep those things under control so they don't come. Always, there'll probably somebody at the door tomorrow morning.
But you were originally a Fresno State student, correct?
No, originally I went to grammar school like everybody else.
Okay.
Then I kind of matriculated up through the system and eventually wound up at Fresno State.
Okay, and how long were you at Fresno State?
So let's put it this way: I started with a full head of hair.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I was there for quite a while. It took me like 6 years to get a 4-year degree. I was real smart. It takes me what, an hour and a half to watch 60 Minutes too. So I guess some things never change.
What made you decide to go to Fresno State? I know that, and we'll talk about it a little later, but I know that you have a residency up north as well.
Right. Well, no, I came here basically to play baseball, but obviously I stunk, so that ended pretty quickly. And once you fill out the paperwork, you don't want to have to do it to go somewhere else. You wind up wherever you are. So.
And then somehow you were on radio as well at KFSR, who's a sponsor of this program.
Well, at the time when they let me on, it was not actually over the air. It was just kind of piped into the dorms and into the
campus
offices. Yeah, they didn't have any on the air, over the air in those days. So
now it's the territory that it covers is much bigger.
Yeah, I guess we might even get out to the parking lot now, huh?
So you are an author. Talk a little bit about what made you decide this is the field for you, amongst other things.
Well, I don't know if you decide those things. It's more like, the way I write is not like most people do it. Most people actually know what they're doing. I have no idea what I'm doing. So it makes it much easier for me. Keeps facts and things out of the picture. So I can basically then just focus on creating. And so actually what it came down to is I was involved with a lot of guys in the music industry, and I asked one of them if he wanted to do a book. He said yes, and so I wound up writing his autobiography, and now that's what I seem to be doing since I have a half a dozen of those, or not quite 4 of them. I guess that's not quite a half a dozen, and that's a third of a dozen.
You need 2 more, and you'll get half a dozen.
Yeah, if I get to that point, then I'll actually probably reinvent my sanity.
So do you want to get to that? We're jokingly talking about half a dozen.
It isn't whether I want to, it's whether anybody wants to read things that I put together. Because it really comes down to when you do an autobiography of somebody else, it's obviously not your story, so you have to tell it their way. And so you have to immerse yourself into somebody else's entire thought process, which makes me basically a schizophrenic in training, which is not the best approach to life. It's hard enough to be one person. Then again, some of those guys I see out there, they're like 6 or 7 people, but that's a different story altogether.
Talk about the process of helping somebody write their book or writing an autobiography.
Well, first you have to have a life.
Okay.
I don't have one of those, so I don't have to worry about writing my own. But when I work with somebody who actually has a life, then it's a matter of trying to figure out the storyline that we want to pursue to make it an interesting read for those that are actually out there wanting to read. Now, granted, reading is kind of becoming passé in this day and age where we're just kind of injecting stuff into people. So I look at it from the standpoint of trying to create something unique out of something that's could be considered ordinary depending on who does it.
And talk about what kind of questions you ask the person.
I don't really ask questions. I let the conversation. What I will do is ordinarily have a conversation with the subject or client or however you want to. I don't know how to call these people. Actually, I do know how to call them. I got them all on my phone. But address them? No. No, I don't have their addresses, so I can't do that. Well, anyway, what I do is basically sit with them for a couple hours. We record everything we talk about, and it just, whatever it is, it is. There's nothing set. And then I use a lot of the information from the past of their life that I can find in different sources all over the internet and in the encyclopedias or anything else, and put together what I basically consider a storyline or an outline of the whole book. Then we get together and they fill in all the blanks with the stories that they want to tell about their life. So it is actually their story. I'm just basically giving them the framework to build the book with.
How long does it normally take you to go through all this process?
Well, that's the thing, is that it's not, I don't have an actual normal. Then again, what is normal if we're all different? Anyway, we don't want to get into that subject because I'll go for an hour on that one. But anyway, no, the bottom line is there is no normal processing time. It's all a matter of how often or how available the subject is to work with whatever parts of things I get put together. I've got 3 books in the process, and they're all at different stages. One is within a few months of completion. One is at the outline stage, and the other one is at the stage of the outline being written. So they're all in the process, but at various points. So, and what slows it down, well, for example, the one that's the closest to completion is about a music producer in Germany, Dieter Dierks, his life, and he produced several big name rock bands from the 80s mostly. And he happens to live outside of Cologne, Germany. As such, that means that we can't get together on a daily basis to go over everything, so we end up having to meet when we can. As such, that does slow it down, whereas if he lived like across the street, we could meet it daily and get it done in a couple hours. So if everything were ideal, I could probably do one within a couple of months.
So the book you're working on with Dieter,
right?
Talk about what you want to cover in that book, or is there a period?
Well, the problem is now with Dieter is his life is not just confined to a few-year period that people are interested in, because of the fact that he still is involved not only in music now, but also in video production, development of video products like DVD Plus. He is the founder of that product. He's also developing a 4G video product that's now slowly, or it's a 4G 3D video product that's unique for the marketplace as well. So there's a lot of new things. So there's a lot of the music stuff from years back coming up through probably about the mid-90s, and then all of or not even that, the late 80s, early 90s, and then after that it's a lot of the technology stuff.
So how do you know what to cover in your book? I mean,
well, you don't want to get boring. If you just write about, well, when you're recording, you got to move the fader this way, and then got to put that, and then you put in this to make that, because the only people that will read them are like 6 producers that want to find out how you get a sound. So you have to try to tailor it to a general market by making it interesting. Now, with the way I write, which seems to appeal to my clients anyway, is the fact that I tell them, first off, we don't do the bitterness story. If you're bitter about something, take it to somebody else. We're not going to write the abuse stories. We're not going to write the sex and drugs stories. We're not going to write all of those stories because nobody cares to read them, to be quite honest. Those that want to read them aren't the people that want to read our books. So we try to put into it the spirit of the artist and his life, more so focus as a focus rather than the stale, dry sex, drugs, rock and roll, because they all did the same things. You can read anybody else's book and say, here, just carbon copy that and stick it over here. We all did the same things, okay? So rather than bore people to death with that, it's better to approach everything for fun and entertain, because that's what entertainment is. It's to entertain. That's what the root word is. So the idea is to try to produce something in a manner that's different and unique and brings out the spirit of the life of the person as much as anything. So it's more of, when you read the books I work with, they come across as a guy sitting down to dinner with you talking about his life, not somebody who's telling you a history story and reading like a textbook. And so the approach appeals to the clients I have, who all tend to be total gentlemen, actually. There's none of the, I was surprised, but I'm not surprised because of the fact that, see, they are more along the lines of my thought process as well. So I guess that's what appeals to them about working with me too, is we are similar in thought. So it makes it much easier to put together their thoughts in the manner that makes sense for the reader. So.
You use a lot of humor in your books, just like you're doing here on camera.
Depends on whose idea of humor. I mean, I get criticized for my humor too. Well, that's not funny. I said, well, it's okay. So, you know.
Do you think that helps you in the writing process?
Well, it is something I bring to the table that I don't think every other person who ghostwrites can, because it's not something that I do. I don't have to try it. I just play with words, and the words themselves are funny. If you look at the context of usage in a word, you can find humor in almost any situation. It's a matter of just looking at something from the standpoint of, let's not take anything seriously and have fun with life, because life's too short to take seriously.
The editing process in a book can be the most cumbersome process. How do you know when you have a final product?
I don't. I never have a final product. I follow the Walt Disney line of thought on that one. Walt Disney said, once something's done and out, it's done, I don't look at it again, and I don't want to think about it, because then I remember all the things I should have done. It wasn't like today where they can go back and edit it again and fix it again and put it out on video or anything like that. In those days, there was none of that. So I look at it from the standpoint of, I can go through a book, and even with Herman Rarebold's book, the first one that I did with, and speaking of scorpions, I go through that, and I can still see things I missed. And I said, how was I so foolish to miss this? Well, I know how I'm so stupid. I can miss things. My wife says I have to get smarter to get stupid. So I just, I can play with a story forever. However, there comes a point where we finally say, look, you don't have to have every joke in the book. I always say you do, but then again, it gets you get away from the story too far if you put every joke in.
You mentioned the book that you're talking about now is of Dieter, the producer, but you mentioned you have several that you're working on. Is it okay to have multiple projects open?
Well, the whole point is that you have to be able to separate your mind, because every story is a different story. Like I tell people, I don't see the world like everybody else does. And it's kind of an odd thing. I didn't realize this was unique until I started really analyzing the way other people think. I see the world as I'm like an observer watching everybody else doing things. I don't see myself as actually here in this world. I'm like on the outside looking in all the time, so I'm continually observing stuff. And as I observe it, I document it mentally as how this works and that works. So every life is different. Now, obviously, there's going to be crossing elements. The two that are in the process right now are both guys that worked in the same exact place at the same exact time. So a lot of their lives cross each other throughout their stories. So we will use that, obviously, as cross-referencing for information, because obviously one may tell me a story about a studio that they worked in. Well, the other guy worked in the same studio but didn't tell me the story, but now I have that story that I can spin into the other story as well, and still keep everything true to form, because everybody experienced the same basic things.
So do they give you a timeline when they want the project complete?
No, it's more like with creative people, and I'm dealing with creative people because musicians are very creative. Now, the reason they need me is they're only good for 3 minutes at a time. I can do a little more than 3 minutes at a time. And no, I won't go there. Anyway, the point is that the idea is there's a difference between writing a song, which is a story, and writing an entire novel based on a story. And so the idea is I'm taking the story that they give me and embellishing it in the way that they would, and then they go through it and they say, I don't like this, I don't like that. So when I'm playing with their stories, I see each person differently. Each person is separate. And yet, from the standpoint of their tale, it's not that different than anybody else's, except they did different things. So keeping them straight can be difficult, but keeping them at different stages is also a key element. Because if they're all at the exact same stage, then it becomes very complicated, because the finishing of it, the editing, the final edit, like you said, is difficult. Because I have to keep in mind who I'm thinking about at the time. And I could do probably a half a dozen at a time if I had to, or had them on the table. 3 is plenty at this point. I could do more, like I said. My wife does the actual final edits on everything. She does the final proofreading and the grammar and all of that, because I'm lazy. And actually, she's better. She's a college professor in English, so Her English is obviously much stronger than mine in that respect, even though she wasn't born in this country and didn't go to college in this country. Her English is better than mine, and if you don't believe it, ask her. She'll tell you every flaw that I have, every improper verb I use, and all that kind of thing. So I don't even know the terms she tells me. Well, this is the... Okay, if you say so, I don't know.
She sounds like a fascinating person. Well, maybe one day we'll have her as a guest.
Yeah, she'll sit there and just stare. No, she gets very
So
shy.
you're the extrovert in the marriage.
Pretty much. Well, not really. She is when it comes to certain, like with friends and at parties and things like that, she's much more extroverted. I'm not, the thing, it's like they tell you, comedians are never funny when you just sit down with them because they're tired of being funny all day. You have to catch them when they need to be on. Well, with me, I'm on all the time anyway, so it's not a big deal because this is really the way I behave at home. My wife gets mad at me because she says, well, you can't do that all the time. I said, well, okay, so I have to be straight at home. So everywhere else, I air it out. That doesn't mean that I'm funny, but just means that I think I'm funny, which I guess...
This is who you are and how you behave.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a shame, isn't it?
Let's talk about one of the more popular books that you've done with Herman Rarebell. Now, tell our audience who Herman Rarebell is.
Well, Herman was the drummer and the key songwriter, actually, for the Scorpions during their years where they actually recorded albums people listened to.
And the Scorpions are who for our audience
Well, the
members?
German rock band that recorded Rock You Like a Hurricane, Wind of Change, Still Loving You, had many big hits in the 80s, probably one of the biggest acts of the 80s, actually.
So Herman's book's actually complete.
Yeah, well, well, I'm not going to go back into it now because it costs money to republish it the same way. We are going into German in the near future, so we'll see if the German people will laugh at my jokes. I don't know. But.
How long did it take you to do that? And talk about that process.
Well, that's what I said. With Herman, he lives in Europe, so obviously that meant we aren't going to see each other on a daily basis. So I wrote the outline in 2010. And we got together in June. I gave him the outline, and then we got together. Then we couldn't, because of obligations we both had, couldn't get together until the following January to actually go through the outline and start putting the actual story to the outline, or the let's put it this: we're putting the meat on the bones. Okay, so that was in January. So I came back from that trip in January of 2011, and we put the book out in September of 2011. So from the time I actually got the final information to getting it out was about an 8-9 month process. And actually it went to the publisher in June, so.
Marketing the book. What did you learn about marketing? Because you actually were doing a lot of on the ground work. I met you when you were marketing the book.
Marketing is well, let's put it this way, it's not a treat. It's a difficult process from the standpoint of Herman isn't in the band anymore, so there isn't the natural media of being in the band playing every night somewhere. Because, for example, I just got back from an English tour that he was doing with Michael Schenker, who was playing all over the UK. So he said, come on over, we'll go and push some books. Well, during the time there, at every show, we would sell between 10 and 20 books. Just without even trying, because he's on the stage, they see him play, they say, oh, okay, he did that, and then they say, well, buy the book, natural sales. Whereas when you don't have that natural exposure, then you have to make your own, it's a little more of a you got to make a lot of calls or emails. Actually, emails, I don't do any calling. I don't like to bother people. They don't like to be bothered with me. In fact, I don't even like to be bothered with me.
While you were here, one thing that I found interesting is you did a road tour. You went down to L.A., then you went to Las Vegas with Herman.
Yeah.
Talk about that. I mean, how were people still wanting to meet him?
The bottom line is it's not whether they want to meet Herman as much as they want to read the book, and the opportunity they want to read the book. They're going to get a copy of the book. Well, this way they could get it signed and personalized, and so those kind of the book tours for the most part are simply to get the name in the media so that the people know and recognize that a book is out there. And being that it's the only book written by any of the members of the band, the level of popularity obviously is very high because there's nothing else that they can read directly from the members of the group. So it made it very easy to get a lot of doors open for us that ordinarily might not be.
Where can our audience members find out more information about this book?
Well, it's on Amazon, of course.
Amazon, and so they can go on and buy it right now.
Yeah, run out and get it right now. I need them.
Did you learn anything in the process of Herman's book? I mean, you're working on several other
projects.
projects.
Well, I mean, the whole point is you grow with every experience. So obviously with Herman's book, I learned the process because it was the first time I'd ever done an autobiography with anybody. So the processing is a little different than writing a novel, where when you write a novel, you do whatever you want to do, and then you go back and fix it and make it the way you want it. With an autobiography, you can do whatever you want to do, but it still has to stay true to the story. So you have a lot more limitations that you have to follow within, and then try to keep yourself focused on what it is you're trying to get across to the reader, because you want to tell the story the way you want to tell it, and yet you don't want to disappoint anybody when they read it and saying, well, we wanted more of this, we want more of that. Well, you can't please everybody, of course. And I didn't try to, but the bottom line was we tried to give, like I said before, the spirit of Herman's life, which is let's have some fun. We'll talk, but we're not going to talk about every night what we did and who we were with and all that, because that just gets old real quick.
Do you think people will criticize the fact that you don't bring in like the sad? When I'm reading one of your books, I'm reading jokes, I'm reading kind of the upbeat
Well,
version.
we aren't going to appeal to the people who watch Jerry Springer,
Okay.
because they just want smut. They just want garbage. And I won't write that. And I told Herman when we started, I tell all my clients the same thing, I don't write that and I won't. And that appeals to the clients I have, because they don't really want that either. They don't want their legacy to be, here's my book, it's all about all the women I was with, and it's all about the drugs I took and all of it. They want it to be about what they did, how their life went, and all the stuff beyond even just the music that they did, who they are as a person. Because I think in a lot of those, the personality is lost. You don't really know the person when you finish the book. You've read it, and yet you don't know the person. You just know that he did this and they did that, and he went. But you don't really feel the sense of, like, you spent the night with the guy talking about his life, or you're a good friend of him. I want everybody, when they finish, to feel like they're buddy with the guy that the book is about, that they just felt like they now know him like their best friend.
You have done a lot of work introducing audiences to the people you're writing about. What do you want our audience to know about you? Because, it's not an easy thing for you to do, to sit there and write a book about someone else, and the someone else is in Europe.
Well, from the standpoint of that, I don't really have an ego. I don't really care. See, I write for the people who are going to read it. I want them to enjoy it. And so whatever gifts I have to do that, I'm glad I can use, I'm glad I found a way to utilize it to be able to make people happy. That's what it really comes down to. So for me, I'm not really worried about what my legacy in life will be. If people say, hey, I read that first book that he did with Herman, I'm going to read this other book over here because he wrote this, great. And if it makes them happy, wonderful. If it doesn't, well, I can't get any better. So, I am getting better. I write much better now than I did with Herman's book, just because I'm doing it more than I did then at the time. So
We are running out of time this week on the program, but how do you define success? When will you know that you've been successful?
I already have been. I don't think there's a criteria for success. It's all a matter of, do you feel like you've done something that's worth remembering? And that can be just having raised your kids properly, down to whatever. So the legacy of a life is not about what you've done, but on the big stage, whereas it's about whatever you've left. And that's why I said that goes back to why I won't write the trash. I don't want people to remember me as some guy that was a party to writing a trash book, even though it may sell millions of copies. Money isn't going to be something that's going to be worth anything when you're not here anymore. But the legacy of what you've left will always remain, and people will be able to read, for example, all these books I'm working with, and a lot of them, for example, two of them right now are from the 1960s. Tommy Rowe, who was the king of bubblegum, which, obviously that's going to have a huge audience.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and then Jim Yester of the Association, and they had several big hits in the late 60s, Windy, Never My Love, and Cherish, Along Comes Mary, so they both came from very big, well, Tommy Rose, who had number ones at both ends of the 60s around the Beatles, and played with all those people, knew everybody in the industry, and even got a shot on Green Acres. So, like I said, the legacy of what I want to leave behind is that I wasn't a party to whatever greed and lust for money is out there, which sadly, it seems to dominate entertainment and media in general, and that's a shame.
We have a couple more minutes here on the program. I didn't mean to cut you off, but
Don't worry. I got cut off by birth. It was just I didn't grow. I only grew a certain height. So
who should read your book, or what kind of audience?
everybody should read my book. I need the money. That way I don't have to do shows anymore. I can now rest, and I can be an obnoxious, rich guy sitting in the middle of nowhere.
But who should be the?
I'm already an obnoxious guy. Just all right.
Who would be the people that would say, this book is a fascinating book?
I don't know if fascinating is the right term for what I do. It's fun. I want it to be a fun read, so that while you're reading it, you're disappointed that it's over, because it's so much fun and you had a nice ride while you were there.
On that note, the book is available on Amazon, you said?
Yeah, and speaking of scorpions, and also my novel, which is titled what is it titled? Tomorrow Will Be Yesterday: The Story of Bash, which is a novel about a rock and roll band, fictional rock and roll band, obviously, since it's a novel from the 70s. So the idea was cross-referencing of two books about similar subjects, so that was the idea. So they're both available on Amazon, of course, and everything is nowadays. If it's not on Amazon, you pretty much can't sell it, which I'm going to send them a copy of this interview and have them say, hey, you guys want to send me a little bit of, on the side for, bubbling, but anyway.
Well, thank you, Michael, for coming on the program this week.
Oh, thanks for being had. I was being had. Or you were being had. I was had.
That's all for this edition of San Joaquin Spotlight. I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian. Our guest today is author Michael Krikorian. Thank you to 90.7 KFSR Fresno, CMAC Fresno, and the volunteer crew that made this and every production possible. That's all for this edition of San Joaquin Spotlight. Tune in next week for a new edition.